Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Big Bros podcast. My name is Ilan and I'm joined by my lovely friend and comrade, Jeremy Tussio. How are we, my friend and comrade?
I'm well, mate. How are you?
I'm well. Where are we tonight? And this doesn't look too familiar.
No, we're in a different environment. First time recording, not in down in the dungeon of my basement of my home. We're in your place today, and opposite from the basement. We're upstairs. We've got some natural light for once, which is nice. And we thought, why not? Let's switch things up a little bit. So it's nice to be in a different setting. Hopefully, it gets the juices flowing mentally as well.
Yeah, I like it. I think a bit of change is good.
Yeah.
Sometimes having to adapt to a different environment can be a very healthy thing. And yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind this little setup. You're right. We've got the Andrew Huberman recommendation of having some natural light rather than artificial lighting.
It's good. I think it actually works well in terms of mental clarity and getting thoughts going through your mind, because I think, we've been in the basement for a while, which is good. I love the basement location, but I think changing it up challenges us a bit further as well.
And that's what we're all about, I guess, is change, embracing change and finding new ways to optimize our performance.
That's it.
So if changing the environment and can help optimize our performance, who knows? Why not do it? But that goes for anything in life. What are we chatting about today?
Today we are talking all about networking in your 20s. Even if you're starting a little bit earlier, if you're in your late teens, it's applicable as well. But networking in general, and this can be networking from a job perspective. It can be networking in terms of just trying to build your overall relations with people, be it friendships, be it romantically, professionally. Networking as the big umbrella term in this week's episode. And we wanted to talk about this because it's what we're currently going through right now. I mean, I finished university last year, have started full-time work this year. Networking has been a big theme for me, especially over the past couple years, and especially the past 6 months in general. And you know, you're still studying as well, Ilan, but networking is massive for you, isn't it?
Oh, it's massive. I mean, with a degree like psychology, which takes 6 years at minimum to complete, you want to be utilizing that time to, for example, because psych and as well as physio, they're both allied health fields, but they're massive fields in that you can work in a lot of environments, and networking can be a really vital key because you can actually filter out what you want to work in. So for some, it might be wanting to work in a hospital as a physio. For some, it might be wanting to work in private practice. Networking with someone who works in a hospital versus someone who works in a private practice, as an example, can give you a bit of a kind of snapshot of what might happen, and just getting on their good terms, learning more about what they do, that can inform your own decision making. So I suppose a lot of what we chat about today will be things that we have learned over the last few years, some of the things and lessons we've found worked for us, things that don't work for us. And I think especially in your 20s, having this conversation can honestly be your best superpower, because there is a really famous quote and it says, it's not about what you know, but about who you know. So what this essentially is telling us is that it's less important about the skills and the knowledge that you might possess, albeit it's still crucial, but actually getting your foot in the door relies way more about the network you have around you. And there's also like another thing, which is it's not necessarily about how rich you are, but also how rich your network is. Because truthfully, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. So if your network is high performing individuals, you're more likely to develop the same acumen they have, whether it be in business, whether it be in academics, whether it be in anything you pursue.
Yeah, and if you can get yourself into the habit of getting yourself around those people from a younger age, you're going to do yourself wonders in the long run. And, coming out of school, everyone's kind of like in that free-for-all mindset. Like, yeah, you might still have some of your schoolmates, which is excellent. But once you get out into the big wide world and you're moving away potentially from your schoolmates, someone's going off to study this, someone's going off to study something completely different, someone might be traveling. It's like, all right, well, you're on your own here now, essentially, in terms of a professional standpoint, or on your own more so than when you were in school. You've got more responsibility, more accountability for yourself. So if you can work out how to get yourself into the environments that will hold you better in the long run at an earlier age, you're doing that, far out, it's going to be great for you. And that was something that I tried to do from the get-go. I was very lucky. I knew I wanted to go down the physiotherapy pathway for my career. I knew that from when I was in school. So what I did then was really just try to immerse myself into that environment from the get-go as soon as I finished school. I did take a gap year, which we've spoken about on this potty. And after I came back, that's when I really got cracking and wanted to, immerse myself as best as I could for my future career. So what I did then was I just knew, all right, I need to get a job in the industry from the get-go as soon as I can. What that job is, I wasn't sure about, but how do you learn? You ask around and you reach out to people and you find out what you can do. So what I found out for myself was, in my case, I knew that I could work at a sporting club and not necessarily do physiotherapy things, but do things that would entail assistance to the medical team. So for me, that looked like becoming a sports trainer at a football club. So that was involved with learning how to massage, learning how to tape up players. And that is all something that is very much down the route of what I'm studying. And the fact that I could learn those skills from the get-go at the age of like 19 years old, now that I'm 24, it's been incredible because that's 5 years under my belt of doing that. And a lot of stuff that I honestly didn't even learn from being at university, I learned from actually being on the job itself and now applying into my career. So that's one example. And the next example was I started working at a physiotherapy clinic as a receptionist from the age of 19 as well. So, again, just getting myself in the door. It's that foot in the door thing. You don't necessarily need to be doing the job just yet. And more often than not, you're not going to be able to do the job without any credentials. And why wouldn't you? You want to learn how to get to that stage. But it's just about talking to the right people, finding out who those people are first, and just saying yes to opportunities, because the opportunity that might present itself to you might not be one that you might fancy. I mean, like, I never thought in a million years like I'd be sitting behind a desk answering phone calls as a receptionist. But the fact that it was in the environment I wanted to be a part of, I couldn't ask for anything better. Like I was in the industry, and 4 years of doing that, and it eventually led to me getting a job as a physiotherapist in the same organization. So it's just an example of how one thing leads to the next, as long as you put yourself in the environment to be able to learn, to be able to network, to be able to build relations. And if you show that you're passionate, because I was always passionate, and if you show that passion, it spreads and it's infectious, and everyone in that environment will be able to see it, and they'll be able to look at you and be like, hey, you know what? Like, this kid actually really cares and gives a shit about this environment. Let's consider them further.
Yeah, it's so true. I feel like as well, you hear all these stories that when applying for jobs, you're most likely to get that job by virtue of being a referral hire. There's a study that says 40% of all hires come from only 7% of applicants. As a consequence of that, so employer referrals are the most effective way to hire. So just by virtue of knowing someone mutually...
Say that again. So only 7% of applicants have come from 40% of all hires.
Yeah. So the idea being there is that you're more likely to get a job assuming you're a referral. Because the thing is, as an employer, you're making an investment in terms of who you're deciding to hire, right? And it's such a big judgment call to make. Sure, you have an interview. Sure, you have a resume you can read over. But the truth of it is that's only a real snapshot. And the best predictor of who you might be hiring is someone else's knowledge about that person. You're way more likely to hire someone mutually, right? Because you can at least get a good word from that person about, hey, are they willing to do this? Are they willing to do that? What are they like? Are they going to fit, the company's culture and so forth? So as an employer, you're a bit more rest assured knowing that, you're not taking a punt out of the dark. There is a bit of that familiarity aspect. You mentioned though the physio practice you were working at. You're now a physio, like an actual physiotherapist at that practice. But you did something really, really clever when you got back from gap year. You actually reached out to the clinic head and found out more information about that. So immediately you started networking with people in the field. What did you actually do? How did that actually come about? And Did you have any anxiety just reaching out for the first time to someone who, you probably didn't think they were going to be your boss, but at the time, you never knew where that opportunity could lead. Tell us a bit about that.
Of course. And something I want to preface is that this place that I'm working at now as a physiotherapist and was working at previously as a receptionist wasn't the first place that I originally tried to get a job at as a 19-year-old. There were a couple of other physiotherapy practices that I reached out at the time that were just local ones that I knew of. And, I actually, I got rejected the first times I went and gave in my resume, and they said that they weren't interested, they weren't hiring, they weren't looking, and that's fine. So, the first couple I actually got rejected from, which was good for me because it, made me want and hunt something further. And then, I came across the one that I'm at now. So if you're in Melbourne, shout out Caulfield Physiotherapy. So get down if you need some treatment. But if the way in which I came across this one was eventually, it was originally through word of mouth. I heard about it through a distant family member. And they said, the physiotherapist there, he really likes students that are studying physiotherapy. So reach out and see how you go. So that I did. I called up and we arranged a meeting and we had a chat and the rest was history. And one thing I remember in particular was I brought along my resume, and that was a key factor. They look at your resume, they read what you've maybe done, but let's be real. As a 19-year-old, you've done nothing. You've just been in school. You've got your community service awards written down. You've got the fact that you enjoy your leisurely activities, playing sport, and you've achieved nothing at the age of 19. Let's be real. So
you're cannon fodder.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're a 19, 20, 21-year-old listening to this, don't think that the resume is that important, because it's not. It's how you present yourself in the meeting, interview, chat, whatever you want to call it. And I think the best way to handle that, which is how I did, was just be friendly. Be an interesting communicator. Just talk to the person as if you've just been friends with them and you want to be on board with them as much as they should want to be on board with you. If you talk to them about what you're like as a person, you mention your characteristics, your personality, and smile. Remember to smile. Smiling is free and it costs nothing, and it is the best thing you can probably do in situations like this. If you come across as quite robust and stringent and scared and apprehensive, that shows. And I don't think an employer would want someone that comes across as quite apprehensive and scared and intimidated. They want someone that seems confident. They want someone that seems charismatic, enthusiastic. And you don't have to have these qualities to such a deep level from the get-go, because these are qualities that are built up over time with experience. As a 19-year-old, I was not as confident and enthusiastic as I am now. But there's an element of faking it till you make it. And I'm a true believer in that. And that's a key point when it comes to networking in general, is the aspect of faking it till you make it. And that's not to say you're being untruthful about yourself, but it's to say that you're kind of just giving things a go as you go along the way. You don't know necessarily what it is you like and dislike yet. You might not know what it is you want to do, what pathway you want to go down, but you're just seeing how you go. You're trying things out, and you're just going to work out what sticks and what doesn't stick. So that was my story, essentially.
I love that. I so love that. And the thing is, there is anxiety that comes with that. I remember my first job as a 19-year-old setting medical retail equipment. Just beyond networking or anything else, just speaking to people can be such a nerve-wracking thing. And I remember just the thought of reaching out to people when I was 19, 20 years old was actually the most daunting thing in the world. Now it's like shelling peas. I actually don't care. When, I just have trust and confidence in the way I communicate, that I'll leave a good impression. But back then I was so anxious. I remember even speaking to my older big brother, the OG big brother, And he was telling me that most people don't, they feel flattered when you reach out to them, when you ask them for their advice, and you almost position yourself as the apprentice and them as the expert, although you don't do it in like, a people pleasing way. More times than not, people want to help you out. And something I thought about as well is like, let's say you get a bunch of people who are a little bit older, who are quite successful, and they have to make a punt on a bunch of 20-year-olds who they believe are going to be successful in the next 20, 30 years. They're most likely going to punt on the person that's actually doing the networking early, that's showing signs that they're wanting to make it in a specific field. It doesn't actually matter if they want a job in that field, but more specifically, it's their desire to want to learn more. And people are going to put more money on those people, because I think especially as older people, we look at younger people are viewed more now as like a snowflake generation. So when someone can actually be confident enough to reach out and say, hey, like, I'm not the expert here, you are. I would love to learn more about what you're doing, and, see where the conversation goes from there. People have so much respect for that. There's a story I want to share about my cousin though. And, didn't ask her if I could share this story, but I think she'll appreciate it, which is she works at a major news network, and she works in like the liaison field. So she manages when guests come on, make sure they settle in, help set up the equipment. That came about in a really interesting way. And speaks to the importance of just asking people, not for a job or anything, but just showing genuine interest and curiosity. She was at a cafe one day, my cousin, and she was just doing her uni work. And then she sees one of the news presenters from this organization. And at the time she was thinking, oh no, I'm so nervous. I'd love to say hi to this person. No expectation or anything else, just wanting to tell them like, I'm a huge fan of your work, whatever. And she was messaging me, and I was telling her, like, you should go say hi, tell her you love the work, how many young people are going to go up to a news presenter and say, like, I really, appreciate what you do. So after a bit of back and forth, I convinced her, and she decides to go up. They start chatting, and, my cousin explains she's doing law, commerce, like she's really, in this field, she's driven, blah, 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 blah. Next thing you know, she says, hey, there's an opening for like a client liaison role at the news station. How about you send in your resume if you're interested, if you want a bit of extra cash? Lo and behold, 2 years later, she's still working there. And it all emerged from just deciding to say, hey, I'm a real massive fan of your work.
At a cafe.
And it's like, if you don't shoot your shot, you don't know what will come about. Even within a dating context, we always hear it. It's like, if you don't shoot your shot, you don't know what's going to happen. So just asking something can elicit such a butterfly effect, like you can't even imagine. So I think, although it's anxiety provoking, think about the benefits that might actually come out of it. At worst, nothing comes out of it. You've just sent a really nice message to this person. You've told them, hey, I really like your work.
Exactly.
And you know what? Karma is an interesting thing. They're probably not going to say anything back. More times than not, realistically, they're not going to offer you a job by just you giving them a compliment for what they do.
Yeah, exactly. And that example there is great because it wasn't a formal incident. It was so informal. They didn't know each other. This wasn't anything teed up. It wasn't a meeting that was teed up. It was your cousin saw a famous news presenter, walked over, said, love what you do. I find it really interesting. Just wanted to tell you that. And it was that interest that sparked further conversation, because like you said, it's so nice to get to see someone come up to you and to hear, I guess, the work in which you've done has been noticed and appreciated, and it's someone has shown interest in it. It's a compliment. It's probably one of the best and biggest compliments you can get as a person, is someone completely randomly coming up to you and complimenting you on something, whether that's looks or whether they've known you for doing something in a certain way, because it's gutsy. It takes a lot of balls to just cold approach someone and say something like that randomly. And that goes for networking, that goes for dating. And like you said, what's the worst that can happen? I think something that I've tried to instill in my mind now more than ever is I would much rather feel rejected than regret. And that's important, because like, if I feel regretful, like if I was to regret not going up to someone and talking to them, not going up to, someone in a cafe that I might fancy, or going up to that person about a job inquiry, like if I was to not take that opportunity, I would regret that later, and that would sit within me and make me feel a bit sick, because, it's the what if mentality, like something could have come from that. And if not, so be it. And the if not part of that is so important, because the if not part only comes when you actually try. And that's where the feeling of rejection comes in, and why rejection is actually better than regret, because at least you gave it a go. So you know that, you gave it your best shot, you shot that shot, and nothing came of it, but that's okay. You gave it a go. One thing as well you mentioned previously about networking and interest is that you don't need to know what is involved in the job or in the occupation, whatever it is. As long as you show some level of passion and curiosity towards it, you're already miles ahead. And I've got a really good example for this, which I spoke about. This is last year on the podcast. I remember speaking about it. At the time, I was still at university, and I was on my placements essentially. And I was really lucky that one of the places I got to do some work experience at was the Australian Ballet Company. And I had to apply in order to get that placement opportunity. And here I am applying for a placement opportunity in an industry where I know nothing about. And that is exactly what I did when applying to get this experience of being on physiotherapy placement there. Was I was just honest in the application process that I know nothing about ballet, I know nothing about dancing, but I'm so interested in the expertise and the biomechanics of it, and which is why I want to be there, because I actually know nothing about it and want to learn a lot about it. And that was me just being truthfully honest and raw. And I honestly think that's what sparked a bit of difference maybe in my application versus someone else's. I mean, I don't know the other applications, so look, it might be a little bit ignorant of me to say, but I think my point of difference here was the fact that I was just really honest about not knowing anything, but at the same time passionate about using that to my advantage to want to learn more and to want to be there, because I don't know much there. If I was someone that, came across and made up some rubbish about how I've been involved in dance before and I've, done this and I've done that, it's you can see through rubbish and you can see through, crap. And two, it's like, well, maybe it's actually more interesting and beneficial to the employer to take on someone that actually doesn't know much but is showing so much interest towards it. It seems like it's a little bit more organic rather than something that's a little bit more forced and unnatural.
And whilst that's also true, I think the opposite is as well, which is knowing a little bit of what you want to do and where you have a baseline understanding of where you want to be in a set number of years is also incredibly useful. And I just want to share a story about when I was doing my clinical psych interviews. And I think I spoke about it a few weeks ago, where I got a fuck ton of rejections.
Yeah.
But then the ones I didn't get rejected from, I implemented this one habit, and I think it actually made a massive difference. Not sure how much of a difference it made, but, correlation doesn't equal causation. But in this case, I was told in my interviews, or as I was prepping, explain to the interviewers where you see yourself going as a psychologist, because not every student is going to bring that up, because there's not usually any questions about it. They ask you, what your experience is, a few role plays, ethical scenarios, all that good stuff. Very little time is usually accrued to, asking the student or the applicant, what do you actually want to be, or where do you want to be, and where do you see the setting you want to work in? And I remember I implemented that key tip from someone who told me a few years older. And I remember going into a couple of my interviews, and I thought, all right, I'm going to try and weave this in, because I do think it's important and I do think it'll set me apart. And that's exactly what I'd said. And this doesn't just have to be in the context of when you're getting interviewed for something, but more generally when you are networking for people, is you explain to them, I want to be involved in this. So for example, for me, I said, I can see myself working as a psychologist in a hospital or a private setting. I'd love to work with anxiety. That's always been a very massive, keen interest of mine. But I also love working with, I would love to work in performance psychology. I would love to work with elite athletes, potential occupations that have a lot of high stress, and be a performance psychologist. And I think at the time they had a little bit of a twinkle in their eye when I said that. And I think maybe, I don't know, I'd like to think it was a bit of a refreshing take for once, because, I've at least set myself apart because I've had a long-term vision, and I've told them, if I get into this course, I'm going to use this course to my advantage so I can work in that space. So I think, as you said, you don't necessarily have to be, an expert in what you're going to be doing in 5-10 years. But also alternatively, I think it's also useful to say to them, I think I want to be in this area because I'm passionate because of this. But at the same time, I'm just keen to learn more. And I think that's the main thing I've learned, is just showing that you want to learn more, because people want to help someone that wants to learn. I mean, I'll ask you this. Let's say a first year physio student comes up to you or messages you on Facebook or whatever, and they want to ask you for like some advice on how to get into the field. How would that make you feel?
Absolutely incredible. It would make me feel... that's exactly what I was doing when I was a student. And when I was a student, I wanted nothing more but to just get a bit of insight from someone that's been there and done that. And, if I can be that person that is able to help someone along their pathway of learning, then it's one of the most gratifying feelings you can have.
It's so true. And the thing is, that's something I've tried to really do. Thing is, you don't want to be a people pleaser, and you want to be authentic and genuine. So this is one thing I've learned as well from like my last few years. Whenever I do reach out to someone, because the thing is, before you reach out to anyone, you should have a somewhat of a baseline goal of what you want to achieve when you are networking with people. For some, it might be just getting a bit more knowledge about the area you're working in. For others, it's potentially to get a job in that space. For others, it's just to get a greater network of people. And what I've found is that when you're actually just, show that you're genuinely interested, but you position them as an expert, you are way more likely for that person to actually help you. And that's not being manipulative, because the main tenet of what you should be doing there is trying to actually build a genuine relationship. And, as you said, I think treating them to a certain extent as a friend can go a long way. Treat them like a civilian. It's not like when you see a celebrity and you kind of lose your shit because, oh my God, it's a celebrity.
Yeah, don't fangirl, humble them.
Humble them, but yeah, maybe don't humble, someone you want to get a job from. But yeah, honestly, just being respectful. But there is a caveat there. You should want to stroke their ego a little bit. And don't do it in a manipulative way, but do it in the sense of like, you've been in this field for 10, 15 years. I'm sure you would have learned so much. I'd love to learn more about, some of the biggest challenges you face, because I'm sure I'm probably going to have the same challenges. And, if I can learn from someone who's been there before, that'd be so useful.
And that's different to not stroking their ego like an arse licker or a people pleaser. That's stroking ego in terms of saying, I recognize you have done this. Tell me about that so that I can best prepare myself for when I get there. And that is very different to saying like, oh my God, you've done this. That is so great. I love that. You're so amazing. That is not impressing anyone. That's the equivalent of sliding into someone's DMs and saying, you're hot. You're pretty. You look so good. Like, that is not going to get you anywhere. That is not the stroking of an ego that you should be employing in terms of your networking. You can say, if you want to mention, like, if we want to use that looks example, you can say, you look so pretty here. Tell me what your routine is for X, Y, and Z, because I'm interested. Like, you're making a conversation out of it. So I think that's a key tip to employ is like, yeah, compliment the person. That's fine. And compliments are great, but use that compliment in a productive way. Don't just say the compliment and leave it there, because the person has nowhere to go with that other than saying thank you. But that's not going to separate you from anyone else. Use that compliment and then think about, how can I work this compliment into the conversation to get some conversation generated about it.
And that comes to the point of just being a good talker. So let's say...
Which comes with practice.
And it comes with practice. But if we're stripping this back, right, and we're going to give some tips, hot tips to someone who is a 19-year-old, they're studying something, but they just want to learn more and potentially get a job in this field. What's the first thing they should do? I reckon use the social media to your advantage. LinkedIn was developed for that exact reason. It is literally a networker's wet dream. It really is, because truthfully, people post all manner of shit there, and there's no awkwardness with actually messaging and reaching out to someone on LinkedIn. It's just really what it was designed for. So it's like Instagram is implicitly like, you know, a dating app. LinkedIn is
The save it for jobs.
but for jobs.
So you've got LinkedIn, you've recognized the people that you want to connect with, reach out to, talk to. How do you go about doing that?
Send a message is the first one. Simple. But, you know, for some that's quite daunting. So honestly, you know, be kind to yourself. Let's write a small message where you introduce yourself. You tell the person, you know, you have manners. You say, hope you're going well. You explain what you're doing, what you are, and why you're messaging them. Why is this person receiving a cold message out of nowhere? Which is fine. So you explain, I'm interested in this X, Y, and Z. The reason I'm messaging you is because I've noticed you're doing, or you're interested, or you work here, blah, 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 blah. I would love to learn more about that, because I'm sure that, you know, I want to work in an area like this, or I want to learn skills that are relevant to this industry. And I feel like you've got the knowledge and answers. Would you be open to chatting more or having a conversation? Sometimes they won't respond, and that's fine. You know, you are a random stranger to them. That's fine. But there are going to be people who do respond back to you. And they'll say, yeah, I'd love to chat more. And, you know, that's usually when you know you're on. It's like a date. You know you are on. So now it's time to present the best version of yourself. Honestly, I think, you know, we spoke about coffee dates being a great date for intimate relationships. I reckon they're even better when it comes to building business contacts. You know, who doesn't love coffee? You're caffeinated up, you're spitting ideas, you're in a good zone. So I reckon, depending on who the person is, depending on the vibe, depending if, you know, geographically are you close in location, ask to go for a coffee with them and pay for the coffee. Literally, in a way, treat it in a sense similar to a date, because you've asked for their time. So you should, you know, remunerate them with some sort of, you know, kind gesture, buying a coffee. But before all of that's said and done, I reckon you have to have a set goal of what you want to get out of that meeting. It could be as simple as just getting to learn more about them. Don't be entitled. Be a good talker. Be an active listener. But there's so many things that go into that meeting for it to be an effective one for both of you. What would you recommend would be some like vital tips you can employ?
Appearance is big, which I've spoken about the last couple of weeks, making sure you're well presented, well groomed, on time and punctual more than anything. This is my biggest downfall, one of my biggest downfalls in my character, and something that I need to improve on, because I hate myself for it, like not being on time and not being on punctual. I think the whole mantra of on time is late is true when it comes to the professional sense like this. If you're meeting for a coffee at 2:00, make sure you're there at 1:50 if you're the person asking to meet up. You know, don't be on the dot, because it makes you seem rushed. It makes you look rushed. Get there a little bit earlier. Like you said, pay for it as well. It's just the little gestures add up well. But in terms of punctuality, number one. Number two, appearance as well, which I briefly touched on. Look presented nicely. And that doesn't necessarily mean dress formally and wear a suit. And often that looks like maybe too much. If it's just a general coffee catch up, like you can't go wrong with just a smart casual attire, you know? Pair of slacks and a nice casual button up shirt is probably all you need, or just a nice jumper or t-shirt. Like, stick to the basics, be minimal with it, and you're on your merry way. But something I've also realized with appearance is that appearance actually might not always be the be all and end all, in the sense of just networking, not necessarily professionally, but networking in terms of trying to make more friends, or trying to, just like informally and casually talk to people about jobs or life or whatever it is. Like, for example, if you're at a party, right, and you're dressed in a certain way, you're looking really good, you're wearing your best outfit, you're well groomed, like you're probably looking $1 million, which is great. But the fact of the matter is, people are probably still not going to just come up to you and start chatting to you because you look good. If you want to chat to people and chat to people with purpose, you still need to be the one to make that move. And that's what I've learned, is like, people are scared to come up and talk to you. Like, people are quite apprehensive to make the first move to just come up and say hello. So if you can make that first move by going up to someone, be it professionally, be it casually, whatever it is, if you can be the one to make that first move and say, hello, my name is Jeremy, what's your name? I want to learn more about you, then you're already miles ahead of the rest of the pack, because that level of confidence to just come up and say hello will set you apart from everyone else. So that's where I say that appearance isn't the be all and end all, because you might look so good, but people are still going to be apprehensive to come up and talk to you. So yes, look presentable. Yes, look good. But the fact of the matter is you still need to be the one who is prepared to make that first move, go up to people, have a chat.
Another point there is, and I really love everything you've said, but in that conversation, be very conscious if there's any issues that person is describing that potentially you may be able to fill. Now, as a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, your skill set is probably so limited, and that's fine. So it could be the most little thing that you could do to contribute. They could be talking about the fact that, they run a administration center, or rather they run a company, but, there's a bit of shortage in their admin staff and they're really struggling to find someone else. You could say, hey, look, I'm really happy to fulfill that role a couple times a week if you need someone. You might not have much experience, but offer that contribution. Offer something that you can solve a problem for them. There's nothing more that people love than knowing that the person they're chatting to has the potential answers to a problem or a challenge that they have encountered. So if you can already position yourself as someone who's like willing to do them a favor as well, if necessary, if appropriate, that can again set you apart from everyone else. Because again, most people when they're chatting, it's all about taking. It's all about what can I extract from this person. And then it becomes really, really transactional. And transactional relationships aren't beneficial because it's not built on, I feel like, genuine kind of a genuine connection. There's that underlying of, well, if I can't contribute anything to you, I'm not going to, if you can't contribute anything to me, why should I contribute anything to you? But that being said, if you're offering and willing to solve a problem for someone and you're coming from it from a little bit of an altruistic point of view, people love that. People, just as long as you don't get taken advantage of. But more times than not, you've already positioned yourself so far above everyone else that you're already going to be looked at favorably. And even if there's not a challenge that you could potentially fulfill on their behalf or do them a favor, it doesn't actually matter as much as the fact that they're going to remember that and they might refer you on to someone else. At the end of the day, just having that network of people is so crucial. Because Jeremy, before we end this episode, I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question. Let's say you lost everything tomorrow. Let's say you were living on your own, you had no money, no job, and you need to get a money and a job quickly. What's the first thing you're doing?
Coming back to my passions and interests first, because you can't reach out to people and know what you want to do unless you are able to identify what it is you're passionate about.
But more importantly, once you do that, you're going to contact people in your network.
Exactly. But the first thing is you need to work out what it is you like and dislike. So if I know where my interests lie, that's great. That gives me a starting point. Once I work out where my interests lie, and look, I might not even know 100% where they lie, but have a general idea. Start reaching out to people within that realm of practice. We've spoken about LinkedIn. Use Instagram, use Facebook, whatever it is. Go door knocking, put letters in people's post, like in people's mailboxes, whatever it is. Reach out to people. Don't be afraid. You're going to get rejected. You're going to feel embarrassment. That's just part of the game. And it wouldn't be fun if it was just all handed to you on a silver platter as well, because when you've been made to work for something, it's more fulfilling, it's more challenging, and you feel like you belong there even more so because you're made to work for it. So reach out to people, talk to people, and don't be afraid to put yourself out there as well. Like, social media is really good for that. TikTok is really good for that as well. Like, something that we're trying to, still learn ourselves in this game is like, we're really passionate about our podcast. We're really passionate about, talking about things that we experience in our 20s and hopefully getting people who are like-minded on board with that and are interested in that as well to listening and to hearing these messages, because it's been helpful for us and can only be helpful for them too. So in our, in what we're doing right now is like learning how to craft like TikToks and videos and things differently and putting ourselves out there. Like, I feel like you and I are naturally a little bit more introverted when it comes to, the talking to the camera type stuff. Like,
you are definitely not introverted.
Well, it's not something,
or at least it doesn't present that way.
Well, so there you go. It's because it's not something that like I have ever done up until starting this. So like, in the grand scheme of things, yeah, I do feel like I've been quite introverted up until this point. But that's the beauty of it, is that like it's forcing you to start doing new skills and putting yourself out there in a way that we've never done before. And that's how, one, you will grow firstly personally, because you're challenging yourself to a point which feels uncomfortable. And two, like, people are going to be able to see you more and see what you're about more, see your personality. So if I am starting from scratch, I would want to be putting myself out there on screens more so. And that's not a egotistical thing to say, I think, because I think that's just the way the world is now. It's like we're so digital, and we also have such short attention spans. So if you can work out how to put yourself on a screen for people to see you in a way that is like somewhat entertaining, that has a hook that reels them in, that is how to grab attention, I think. Also, what I want to add to this as well is, a point that, you were talking about how to reach out to people, how to network with people when you're in conversation, and you're talking about, not being afraid to provide solutions and to talk about problem solving. Another key point, I think, and this might be controversial, but I think don't be afraid to be a little bit disagreeable as well when conversing with someone. And by disagreeable, I don't mean like don't make a fight and don't be confrontational about ideas and perspectives. But I think if they're coming to you and presenting certain viewpoints and perspectives to you, don't be afraid to present your perspective that might differ a bit slightly. Don't be so agreeable with everything they say. Because if you're able to say, yeah, you know what? I hear what you're saying about this, but I would do it a little bit differently. I would do it this way. Or I actually think this is happening because of this, which is slightly different to what you're saying. It's like that little element of variance in conversation and perspective will leave that person thinking, this is different. They're not agreeing with everything I'm saying. This would go really well in a job context. This would go really well in a conversation context. Why? Because they're interesting. Two, because they actually listen to what I'm saying. And because they're listening to what I'm saying, they're picking up on what are things that I'm saying that are actually good and strong, and they agree with it. And maybe what are potential flaws or weaknesses that they're picking up on.
I would be conscious with that though, just because some people might think, what does this 19, 20-year-old with zero business expertise know in solving my challenges? So I think you're right to a certain extent that there's a time to be disagreeable and not just being a yes man, because truthfully, you're right. That's a great predictor of how you're going to do in the workplace, because maybe if you stick to your guns and you're knowledgeable, you could provide some really good solutions, but just be conscious with which solutions you're offering to fill and which disagreements you're willing to battle.
Yeah, but I think it's more about how you present it rather than what exactly it is you say. I feel like if it's presented in a warm way, which is kind of like what I said, like using the example of, I see how you see it this way, but me personally, I respect that, but I would do it this way. Mm-hmm. That's saying like, I recognize what you're saying, but I feel like I'm a little bit different and I would do it this way. I feel like that's very non-confrontational and actually comes across as quite interesting regardless of your age.
I love that. And I think if you're doing that, you employ it with a sense of curiosity.
Yeah.
Show that curiosity for sure, because, you're not there trying to like own them or debate them.
Exactly.
But you are just trying to illuminate to them that, hey, I'm on your team, and I'm just curious if, the reason it hasn't worked for you is because of this reason. And that can go a long way for sure.
Exactly.
Anyways, on that note, guys, I hope hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you're watching this on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed the new setting in front of this blank white wall. I can't say it's the most entertaining setting, but
It's all right. We're still learning.
Yeah, she'll do. It'll do.
Exactly.
So no issues there, I guess. So we've got a future option if necessary. But if this episode has been of use to you and you think there are others in your circle, in your friendship group, that this would really help out, please do share it with them, because I think learning to network was something that I am glad I started as young as I did, because I wouldn't be where I am now without it. I wouldn't have the job now that I would have if I didn't, have the balls to reach out to people. And it sounds like it's the same thing for you. So if anyone feels like that's an area of their life that they need to upskill in, definitely give it a go. It'll pay dividends. On that note, guys, please rate us 5 stars. We appreciate all the positive ratings and feedback. On that note, have a happy and lovely Tuesday.
Bye.